At the eastern end of Long Island, where the jaws of the North and South Forks gape, you'll see on the South Fork a creek bounded by barrier spits across the bay from Gardiner's Island. We call it Accabonac Creek. Some call it Accabonac Harbor. We are the Accabonac Protection Committee, a group of citizens whose aim is to protect our creek and its watershed, its health and its beauty, for ourselves and for others, now and in the future. Marching briskly along our roadsides, sneaking through our country lanes, spreading quietly across our fields and around our estuaries. Here they come, the alien invaders, plants that didn't evolve here but think this is a wonderful place to live. Some were brought in deliberately, some came by accident. They left behind them the natural enemies that kept them in check. Here they have unfair advantage. They crowd out the native species, smother them, choke them, poison their root systems, or just plain outcompete them. We end up with monocultures that say, me and only me. Bittersweet. Here's an old acquaintance that nobody loves anymore. Gone are the days when sprays of bittersweet decorated Thanksgiving tables. Now, nobody wants to risk scattering its berries anywhere. No, the word has spread that bittersweet poses a real and great threat to trees, individually and collectively. The vine can just smother its victims like the kudzu down south, or it can squeeze the life out of it in the style of a strangler fig. Bits of the original bittersweet vine are still visible, wound around that young sapling, which was certainly doomed. The vines become in time as woody as their victims and can stand alone after their support dies. It's easy enough to destroy bittersweet when it is still young. Those red roots prove it's really bittersweet. With a mature vine, it needs to be dug up or cut. If cut right at ground level, it may grow back. If cut repeatedly, it eventually gives up the ghost. Its progress across a meadow can be arrested by mowing. This is Pete Weiss carrying out a successful operation to remove a limited area of bittersweet by simple excavation. You're going to get it up immediately.
With reddish roots.
And there's its red roots. Go on and terrific. Terrific. This is wonderful. It makes it look easier than you could ever dream.
Well, it's not easy on the back.
I know.
Look how the roots spread out, go creeping across the ground. Keeps.
And look at this poor eastern red cedar, coping with both bittersweet and another out-of-control plant, Multiflora rose. Wherever bittersweet has infiltrated woods and covered many trees and shrubs in its blanket, it's a big problem. Isn't this a handsome flowering plant? Whoever guessed when they brought it from the Far East in the late 19th century to grace gardens and parks that it was so very talented at running amok? We have heard that it was planted as an ornamental in the original Central Park, soon escaped, and has been a big problem ever since. Some people apparently still think it is a dandy hedge, and it is tall and thick enough in summer for the purpose. But it dies back in winter, leaving a collection of scrappy sticks that make you long for cedars. Here's Pete Weiss demonstrating just why knotweed is so hard to get rid of. It forms a huge network of tough roots underground, and as you can see, they sprout new plants continually. You start with a knotweed and end up with a knotweed grove. And tragically, it seeds too.
Doesn't come out as easily as that.
It doesn't come up as easily as bittersweet.
Ah, that's a big root.
Yay! Show us the root, Plenty. Great. When a group of like-minded folks set their mind to it, and especially if they can recruit some children, they actually can make great headway in removing knotweed and planting beach grass in its stead. Children particularly liked the destroying phase. This is Louse Point, where you used to see the Japanese knotweed but no Gardener's Bay. And this is what several years' worth of repeated diggings brought about. Back to the original beach grass and wildflowers of the old Louse Point. The moral of the story? Persistence pays off. Here's one you may not know. They say it came from Europe, and who could wonder? A bright green ground cover, something like a blanket of tiny lily pads that blooms when the daffodils bloom with tiny yellow starry flowers. I transplanted mine from a garden in Wainscott. Then it rested in my garden for 30 years or so before it went on the warpath. It did have the virtue of dying entirely away after daffodil time. It also had a terrible vice. It produced tiny bulblets, sometimes at ground level and sometimes an inch or two deep, each one ready to become a new plant. I regret to say the only cure for celandine is to dig them out, a difficult job once they have woven themselves into other plants. You can see how important it is to destroy the first one you see on your property, or refrain from bringing them in because they're so pretty. Now here's an invader that has been in the news, where all its bad habits have been revealed. Garlic mustard, which indeed smells like garlic, and some say can be eaten, has made an explosive appearance around here and seems determined to spread all over town by seeding along the roadsides. Like the celandine, it inspires affectionate reactions at first. Oh, it's so pretty, people say. I myself transplanted it into a flower bed. Then I read about it in the New York Times and ripped it out. You see, it plays hob with young forests, preventing tree seedlings from growing by interfering with the relationship of their roots with fungal structures in the soil that are necessary to their lives. One good thing about it is that it's easy to pull up. This can be done anytime, but I recommend pulling before it blooms and seeds. It pays to wait until it's big enough to get a good grip on, I think. Grasp it by the lump in the stem, just below where it branches. It's important to get every seeding plant before the seeds hit the dirt. They make a frightening number of seeds, which are able to sprout even after several years. If you can't pull up every single plant, mow them or lop off the tops before they go to seed. Every minute you spend destroying the first few you see will pay off later, when it would take an army or a very big brush hog. This bad citizen seems to have made a sudden recent appearance. Probably not. We tend not to notice invaders until there are a whole lot of them, and by then they may have been on the march for quite a while. It's hard to ignore a mass like this, nondescript as it is, when it is all over town, and all over the next town, on every roadside not presently mowed. It travels fast, moving in on defenseless meadows. One of the wildflowers it will devour is the wild snapdragon. Another, according to Bruce Horwith of the Nature Conservancy, is the wild aster. As you can see, it's easy to uproot, but once it has carpeted the ground, the only thing to do is mow it. That is why it is so important to destroy the first ones you see. And to do that, you have to know it when you see it. It looks a little bit like a chrysanthemum. True to its name, this climbing rose certainly has multi-flowers and multi-everything else, if truth be told, including a very spreading habit. In blooming season, it creates a delightful appearance and fragrance, and many people love it then. "Why are you so negative about that beautiful vine?" they ask. This is the moment to tell them that it is one of our most relentless destroyers, and that it can climb to the top of pretty tall trees, the better to smother them. As you already saw, it teams up perfectly with bittersweet, and goodbye to whatever they're both climbing over. Like many other invaders, it's easily abolished if caught young, and almost impossible to get rid of once it has a foothold. Then digging up, perhaps combined with repeated cutting down, is recommended. Okay. There's the root. I just broke it off. They have one virtue, providing food in winter for such omnivorous birds as robins and mockingbirds. From the looks of the poor fellows choking down these berries, they eat multiflora rose hips because there is absolutely nothing else around to eat. The worst thing the State Highway Department ever did was to plant the roadsides deliberately with thousands of autumn olive shrubs. They were popular at the time, being of a striking silvery color, like real olive trees, having a nice pink fruit attractive to wildlife, and therefore promoted by the U.S. Soil Conservation Service, harboring no noticeable pests or diseases, and being extremely easy to grow. And when in bloom, they produce a delightful fragrance. Who could have dreamed they would go galloping across the landscape, devastating every native species, spreading both by rooting wherever they touch ground, and by spreading those delicious berries with the help of many birds. The Friends of the Long Pond Greenbelt took on a huge project when they undertook to clear a 39-acre-old field infested with autumn olives. When cut to the ground, they have the bad habit of resprouting vivaciously. You must cut them down again and again as often as they return, and if they are very large, that could be many times. Persistence pays. All the native plant species are coming back. This is the old field, along with the original birds and animals. There is another lesson here too. When small, this plant can be eliminated easily. Just never let it get big. Here's a villainous little vine that can take on even a Goliath of a shrub or a whole field full of wildflowers. Mile-a-minute vine has only recently crossed over the Shinnecock Canal to make its home among us, and maybe you have never seen it. Take a good look and then keep your eyes open in case it turns up in your neighborhood. If it can blanket the dread autumn olive like this, think what it can do to your rhododendrons. Here you can see where the mile-a-minute is because it's turning red in the autumn. It is very easy to pull up, but give due attention to roots left in the soil, and make sure those BB-like seeds don't accompany you to other spots. It has myriad little stickers all over, so it clings to whatever it touches, and that could be your pant leg, and that could be how it goes home with you. Note, this little fellow is dangerous out of all proportion to its size. The common name of Phragmites australis is common reed. These days it is all too common. Nobody seems quite certain where it came from, though you notice that really undesirable plants are always named for a really faraway place. But now it seems well on the way to filling up every place with a good water view and is found worldwide. Its favorite locations, with its roots in or near water, make it harder to get rid of than something in a field where you can bring in digging equipment. To make matters worse, it spreads largely by root-like rhizomes, so that where it seems to be growing by no means indicates the limits of its spread. This pleasant public park is being overrun. Unlimited spread can be discouraged by mowing where mowing is possible. In the Long Pond Greenbelt between Sag Harbor and Accabonac, a good citizen named Jean Held, along with a small group from the Nature Conservancy, defeated a Phragmites takeover of a nice pond shoreline with such implements as trowels and potato forks, and this is the result. It took years and back-breaking labor and eternal vigilance, but aren't we happy to know that it's possible? All the original vegetation came back. Note to waterfront dwellers, the DEC requires permits for anything you do to plants within 100 feet of a wetland. There isn't enough time to do more than give a dishonorable mention to several more bad characters. Spotted knapweed, this nondescript and unobtrusive little plant, masquerades as a thistle, likes sandy spots near the water, and deserves a little attention. For instance, pull it up the minute you see it. Loosestrife, whose proper name is Lythrum, is a terrible pest in New England, but all that I've seen around here, which was in Southampton, has apparently been wiped out by Phragmites. This is the only reported good deed done by Phragmites. Japanese honeysuckle could go unnoticed in the midst of a mass of bittersweet and multiflora rose, but it's right in there plugging away with the worst of them. Burning bush is a menace that has been greatly promoted by people who use it for its undeniable ornamental qualities. Believe it or not, it is still carried in some nurseries. Norway maple, whether Norwegian or not, does not belong here and seeds itself all over like crazy. It will play hob with any woods it infiltrates. Here's a little reminder of how easy it is to execute these criminals. Bittersweet seedlings, bittersweet vine, garlic mustard, knotweed, mugwort, multiflora rose, mile-a-minute vine, spotted knapweed. But you have to recognize them when you see them and act immediately. Take them out while they're small, you'll be glad you did. We're so lucky to live near such a paradise as this, Accabonac Creek, so close to its ancient condition. It's worth a little vigilance and effort to keep it that way.